Hello everyone. Today we are going to start a new lecture series for class 9 and this is plant tissue system. So let us begin this one. In the previous chapter, in the cell biology chapter, you must have learned that all living organisms are made up of cells. So cells are structural and functional unit of every living organism. So no matter what kind of living organism it is, whether it is a unicellular organism or a multicellular organism. Unicellular organisms like, for example, amoeba or a paramecium, or a multicellular organism like a multicellular plant or like us, all are made up of fundamentally the smallest unit, which is called as the cell. Okay. So in case of a single cell organisms, that single cell carry out all the vital functions, whether it is respiration or the photosynthesis or any activities. All the activities are carried out by that single cell. Whereas in case of a multicellular organisms, the cells are arranged or divided, okay, according to a division of labor. So when I say division of labor, because there are large number of cells, so some specific cells, they carry out a specific process. For example, photosynthesis is being carried out by a specific group of cells. Protection is carried out by a specific group of cells. Respiration is carried out by a specific group of cells. Okay. So all the activities of the cell are regulated by a different group of cells and they are arranged structurally in a specific manner. Okay. So if we look at a level of organization in case of a multicellular organism, okay, so we are talking the fact of a multicellular organism. So cell is the fundamental unit, which is the basic unit, and when a group of cells, they will come together, they will produce a structure which is called as a tissue, right. So cell is the basic unit and a group of cells will combine and they will form a tissue. And from tissue, a group of tissues, they would produce a organ. Okay. So if we take an example, okay, for example, a group of cells, they come together, okay, for example, they produce the xylem tissues, okay, and what is the function of the xylem? Is to carry or transport the water, okay. So that is what, so group of cells, they produce a specific kind of structure which is called as the tissue, and the tissue is group of some different types of tissues that are present, which is going to make an organ. For example, xylem along with some other tissues together is going to produce the different parts of the plant. Okay. For example, leaf does not only contain xylem, it contains epidermis. Okay. So epidermis is a different kind of tissue, xylem is a different kind of tissue. So all the tissues come together, they produce a organ, and from organ, so it is going to produce a organ system. Okay, and from organ system it is going to produce a organism. Okay. So that is how the hierarchy of organization is evolved in every living organisms. Okay. But if you want to define tissue, what a tissue is, it's in a simpler term, it's a group of cells, okay, which has a common origin. Origin means they must have originated from a specific cell. Okay. So they should have a common origin and a specific function. For example, what is the function of xylems? The function of xylems, okay, is to carry out the transport of water. So they have a specific function. What is the function of the epidermal cells? The function of the epidermal cells is to provide protection, right. So they have a specific function, and all of them, all the tissues are originated from a common source, okay, common group of cells. Okay. So they should have a common origin and specific function, and that is what a tissue is. So tissue means a group of cells having a common origin and a specific function. Okay. And if we look at the different types of plant tissues that are present, okay, can be broadly categorized into two types. Okay. What are those? One is called as the meristematic tissue, okay, and the other one is called as the permanent tissue. Okay. So as the name suggests, okay, meristematic is derived from a Latin word means divisible. Meristos means divisible. Okay. So, that means these tissues will have the capability to divide and redivide. So, they have their power to divide and redivide. Whereas permanent cells, that means they have lost permanently their power of division and redivision. So, that is why these are called as permanent tissues and these are called meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissues has the ability to divide, and for any cell to divide, it will require a large amount of energy, because cell division is an energy intensive process. And if it is an energy intensive process, the specific features of the cells should be designed accordingly to provide that energy to carry out the process of division. So, let us look at what are the key features of a meristematic cells or meristematic tissues. So, they have the power of division, as we rightly said, okay, they have the power to divide, and fundamentally, okay, they are not differentiated. So, they are undifferentiated. Differentiation means, I am going to tell that little later, that means the cell has not been transformed to a specific structure to carry out some specific activities. For example, if this is a cell, if this has to transport of water, for example, xylem cells, if you know that in class 8, you must have studied the shapes of different kind of cell. Also in the previous chapter in cell biology, you must have studied different types of structure. For example, if you have known like tracheids, they are elongated in structure. Vessels, they are also quite elongated and like this. So, the shape of each of these cells is because they want to transport water, and that is why these cells are elongated. Okay. So, that means transport has to be easier. If there will be smaller cells, so transfer from one cell to other cell, so there will be always a resistance that will be developed from to cell communication. Okay. And hence, it is not going to be an efficient process. Here the transport is going to be much more significantly an efficient process. That is why cells differentiate. Okay. So, differentiation of the cells give them the ability to carry out a specific function. But here the meristematic cells are not differentiated. Why they are not differentiated? Because their ability, their main role or responsibility is to divide and produce large number of cells, and when they will become permanent, only then they are going to be differentiated or carry, and the structure is going to change to carry out a specific function. And as I was mentioning earlier, so they have the property or ability to divide and redivide. So, they are undergoing the process of cell division, and for cell division a large amount of energy is required, ATP is required. Okay. And therefore, they have a dense cytoplasm. Dense means the cytoplasmic amount is very dense, okay, rich in cytoplasm. And if the cytoplasm is rich, so that means the organelles which are present is going to be highly active. Okay. And if the organelles present in the cell is going to be highly active, the energy centers, the mitochondria, are going to produce enough ATP for the ATPs which will be utilized for cell division and processes. And also they have a prominent nucleus, okay, because nucleus is the key feature which is an important aspect of a cell, which is of a dividing cell. So, any cell which is dividing, so the nucleus has to be really prominent in that case. So, both the cytoplasm and the nucleus has to be prominent. And if the cytoplasm is large, as you know that, suppose this is a cell, and if cytoplasmic content is very high, okay, and nucleus is very large, okay. So, what will happen to the vacuole? The vacuole is going to be smaller, okay, because the main role of the vacuole is to store food materials, and here most of the food materials is getting utilized in the process of cell division. So, what will happen therefore? So, the vacuole has to be really smaller or absent, okay. And the cell wall is thin, because here the role is not to provide protection, here the role is more of doing the division. Okay, and as the cell, as it is more dividing, so if the thinner is the cell wall, the division process is going to be better and effective. So therefore, all these properties of the meristematic cells allows them to divide and redivide. And what are the key features? Please remember these three things. So they have a dense cytoplasm, large nucleus, cell wall is thinner, and most importantly, the vacuole is small. The vacuole is small or absent for the fact that, because if you are doing a lot of activity, how can you store? Okay. For example, if you are spending a lot of money, okay, you cannot store, you cannot keep your money in bank account. Okay. The same thing is happening here, because the cell is spending all of its energy in kind of for the purpose of cell division. So therefore, there is hardly energy left or food material left for storage. So therefore, the vacuole is smaller here. In contrast to the meristematic cells, the permanent cells are different. Okay, they are different in what? They have already differentiated. I have already explained you what is the process of differentiation. In the process of differentiation, what happens? So they have lost their power of division here, and they are differentiated. Differentiated means, so they have changed their cell shape. Okay, the shape of the cell has been changed or transformed. So in some cases, the secondary thickening, for example, this is the primary cell wall. Okay. And if this is the primary cell wall, some additional layers, okay, that is going to be also developed. Some additional layers is also going to be developed, and the additional layers is going to provide its more protection. Okay. For example, if the purpose of the cell is for conduction of water, the water is going at a high pressure, and therefore the cell should have the ability to withstand that internal pressure. So there should be thickening, and that is what we call as secondary thickening. So secondary thickening means the thickening that is happened after due to the secondary cell wall formation. So secondary cell wall is getting formed after the primary cell wall is developed. Okay. So these are the major structural changes that a cell has to undergo when it kind of change from meristematic tissue to a permanent tissue. Okay. And the cell is differentiated. As it is not dividing, okay, what will happen? The cytoplasm is going to be smaller and the vacuole is going to be larger, and the vacuole is getting larger for the purpose of storage of food material. So right, so vacuoles is going to be prominent, occupies the major portion of the cytoplasm. So these are the few important characteristic features of the permanent tissues. Okay. So we understood what is a meristematic tissue and what are the key features of a permanent tissue. Clear? Okay. So let's move on. Okay. So if we look at the meristematic tissue itself, the meristematic tissues can again then be divided, subdivided into three different types basis where those meristematic tissues are located. Okay, basis their location. Okay, so one is called as the apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and lateral meristem. So let us look at them in slightly more detailed manner. Okay, as I said, meristematic tissues are the dividing cells. Okay, and they are present in different parts of the plant. So depending on their location, they have been called as apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and lateral meristem. And as the name suggests, okay, apical meristem, where it is going to be located? In the apex, in the shoot apex as well as in the root apex. Okay, so it will be present in the shoot apices as well as in the root apices. And if the apical meristem present in the root or in the root hair, that will be called as root apical meristem. Root apical meristem, and that would be simply called as RAM. Okay, and if it is present in the tip of the shoots, okay, then it will be called as shoot apical meristem. Shoot apical meristem. So this is called as SAM. So, ram and sam. Okay. And what would be the primary purpose of these apical meristem? Because they are present in the shoot apices as well as the root apices. So, the primary purpose of these kind of meristematic tissues is the elongation. Okay. Because once it is dividing, it is producing large number of cells. Okay. Then the length of the plant is going to increase. So, therefore, the primary purpose or primary role of the apical meristematic tissues is to help elongate the plant, okay, increase the length of the plant. Okay. And if you see, if you know that like this is a plant structure, okay, this is the stem. The stem has two different parts. Okay. One part is called as the nodes. So, nodes are the parts where the branches and the leaves actually originate from here. Okay. So, this is where the branching and the leaves originate at this location, and the location which is present between two nodes is called as the internode. Okay. So, as it is present in between two nodes. Okay. And there are some meristematic tissues, okay, are present just above the internodal position here. Okay. And these meristematic tissues are called as intercalary meristem. Okay. Why it is called as intercalary meristem? Because it is present in between the permanent tissues, because this is a permanent tissue, this is a permanent tissue, and this meristematic tissue is present in between the permanent, this meristematic tissues is present in between the permanent tissues. That is why this is called as the intercalary meristem. Okay. And this is going to help in the elongation of the internodal distance. ये जो internode है, इसका distance will be increased significantly due to the growth and division of the intercalary meristem. For example, in some plants like sugarcane, right? Sugarcane में the part which is edible, okay, or where we are getting the sugar is the internodal position, is the internode, okay, and that is what is giving us the juice which is used for production of sugar. And if the length of the internode is going to increase, the productivity of the sugar is going to increase. So, therefore, farmers adopt different strategies and use some chemicals to increase the internodal growth in case of sugarcane, and that can be facilitated by increasing the growth of intercalary meristem. If the intercalary meristem growth increases, the internodal length will increase, and that will boost the productivity. Okay. So, that is the major function of the intercalary meristem. And if you know that, for example, in some plants like grass, okay, grasses, when the herbivores or the cows, okay, they feed on a grassland, what will happen? The apical portion of the apical meristematic portion of the plant is going to be destroyed. Okay, it will be wiped off because that is grazed by the cattle. Okay, and if the apical meristem is lost, okay, during the process of grazing, don't you think that how the plant is growing afterwards? Okay, it is growing because of the intercalary meristem. Okay. So, this is a very important fact that you should remember, that in case of cattle which grazed on the grasses, okay, the growth is primarily now happen due to the intercalary meristem, because the apical meristems are lost during the feeding habit, during the feeding process. Okay. So, this is all about intercalary meristem, which is present in between the permanent tissues, okay, which is the nodes, internodes, okay, and that helps in elongating the internodal length. Okay. And then the other one is called as the lateral meristem, and lateral meristem is specifically present in woody plants, okay, where it helps to increase the girth of the plant. Okay. The width of the plant is increased, okay, width of the plant is increasing, the diameter of the plant is increasing. Okay, and this happens in the lateral phase of its life. Lateral phase means, so not in the immediate growth phase of the plant. Okay, after some years, after few years during the developmental phase of the plant, the lateral meristems develop. Okay, and these lateral meristems help increase the diameter or the thickness of the plant. Okay, and mostly, so these are basically there are two different kind of lateral meristems which are developed. Okay, one is developed in the cambial region, and one is developed in the extracambium region, okay, which is in the cortical part, which we are going to discuss in detail later on. Okay, but the primary function of the lateral meristem is that they will increase the thickness of the plant. Okay, and they are present where they will appear in the lateral part of the life. Okay, after a few years in the developmental phase. Okay, so this is the major function of the lateral meristem. It helps to build up the thickness of the stem. Examples are cork, okay, cork cambium and the cambium. Okay, so the cambium, which is present in between the xylem and the phloem, that is responsible for adding secondary xylem and secondary phloem and helps increasing the thickness in the cambial region. Whereas the cork cambium, which is developed in the cortical region, helps to build up cells in the cork as well as secondary cortex, okay, in the cortical region, and also increase the size at that place. So overall, the increase in thickness, okay, is achieved due to the activity of the cambium as well as cork cambium. ये दोनों के वजह से there would be a lot of thickness that is going to increase in the plant, and this is mostly seen in dicotyledonous plant and woody plants. Okay, so this is all about the kind of meristematic tissues. Okay, but we have also talked about another kind of tissue, which is a permanent tissue. So when a permanent tissue, meristematic tissue will undergo differentiation I already told you, it will lose the ability to divide and it will differentiate to carry out a specific function, and its cellular properties will change. Cellular properties means, for example, the cellular content is going to change. In terms of when differentiation is happening, if you remember, what are the things is happening? The cytoplasm quantity is getting reduced. Cytoplasm is reduced. Vacuole is increases, okay, in size. Nucleus becomes smaller, right, because the cell is not dividing, so nucleus is getting smaller. So these are few things that will happen during the conversion of a meristematic tissue into a permanent tissue. Okay, so once the permanent tissue is developed, okay, the permanent tissues can be categorized into two different types. One is simple permanent tissue and one is the complex permanent tissue. A simple permanent tissue is a tissue which consists of only one kind of cells, and they include parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. Okay, so there are three different kind of simple permanent tissues. So simple permanent tissues consist of only one type of cells. Please remember this thing. Then we have complex permanent tissue, which includes both xylem as well as phloem. Okay, ये दोनों complex permanent tissue है. Why these are called as complex permanent tissue? Because they are made of many different types of permanent cells. Okay, so these are made up of a simple single type of permanent cells, whereas these are made up of a different types of permanent cells. So therefore, they are called as complex permanent tissue, and these are called as simple permanent tissue. Let us look at one by one each of them, and in today's class we will only focus only on one type of simple permanent tissue, which is the parenchyma. Okay, so let us look at one of the simple permanent tissues which is widely present in the plant tissue system. Okay, these parenchyma tissues are usually spherical. spherical shape होते हैं, but they might be oval, round, polygonal or elongated in shape. The shape can vary. Okay, and one of the characteristic feature of the cells is that they're extremely thin walled. उनका जो cell wall होता है, they're very thin. Secondary thickening has not happened as of now. Okay, so they have only primary thickening. Okay, so primary thickening में क्या होता है? The cell wall is primarily made up of cellulose. Only in case of secondary thickening will be achieved, it will be made up of lignin and other depositing materials. But here the cell wall is primarily made up of cellulose. ये एक important characteristic feature है for this kind of cells. Okay. और मैंने जैसे बताया था पहले, okay, what would happen here? The vacuole is going to be larger because it's a permanent cell or permanent tissue. If it is a permanent tissue, it is not dividing anymore. And if it is not dividing anymore, what it is doing? The primary function of this kind of cells is storage of food material. And if the storage of the food material is the primary function, so then the vacuole is going to increase in size. And if the vacuole is going to increase in size, then the cytoplasmic content is going to reduce. So cytoplasmic content is going to reduce and vacuole is going to increase in size. So these are some important aspects of this kind of cells. Okay. And if you see nucleus, the nucleus is also going to become smaller in size, but it's not that these are non-living cells. These are living cells. Okay, they are living. Okay, why they are living? Because they still have cytoplasm, they still have nucleus, which carry out most of the metabolic activities. Okay, metabolic activities is one of the important feature of the living cells, because as they have cytoplasm, which is the center of carrying out all the metabolic activities. So these cells can carry out all the metabolic activities. So these are the living cells. Okay, and what are their function? Their function is primarily carrying out photosynthesis, storage and secretion. Okay, for example, if you look at in case of a leaf, the leaf consists of a lot of parenchymatous cells. Okay, and these parenchymatous cells also have chlorophyll pigments or chloroplast inside them, and those cells are called as parenchyma. Okay, as they have chlorophyll pigments. Okay, also their function is to store food material. Okay, so they are present in many just below the epidermal region of many plants. Okay, to store food material. Okay, so this is the function of the parenchymatous cells. If we look at some modified parenchymatous cells, one of the example is parenchyma. So parenchyma is present in hydrophytes. Hydrophytes means these are the plants which are growing in water. Okay, and one of the typical feature of the hydrophytes that they need to float on the water, because if they will dip down on the water, what will happen? They will not carry out the process of photosynthesis, because उनके लिए water availability sunlight availability काफी कम हो जाएगा. So they have to therefore float on the surface of the water so that they can get enough sunlight. And to float on the surface of the water, they need a phenomena which is called as buoyancy. So buoyancy will help them float on the surface of water, and that is provided by some air pockets. So these are some air pockets which are created around the parenchymatous cells. So these are all parenchymatous cells. Around these are some air pockets or air cavities which are created, and these air cavities helps to float that plant on the surface of the water because of buoyancy. And these kind of parenchymatous tissues are called as parenchyma, because there are air cavities which are located in between the parenchymatous cells. I was discussing about chlorenchyma. So chlorenchymas specifically are parenchymatous cells which has a large number of chloroplasts, so they can carry out a specific function. Okay, अगर 3-4 point if you just need to know about the parenchymatous cells, you have to remember that they are mostly spherical, but they can be oval, they can be elongated and that, and mostly they are isodiametric. The diameters are almost all cells are equal in diameter. Okay, so they are isodiametric cells. Okay, and one of the major function is that they are very thin wall. उनका जो cell wall होता है वो काफ़ी thin होता है. Secondary thickening has not happened as of now. Okay, so these are some of the characteristic attributes of these cells. The nucleus is smaller and the cytoplasmic content is also reduced. So, in this class this is what we are going to discuss today. So, we will continue with other kind of tissue system in the next class onwards. Thank you very much.